is the city budget has bumped that salary.
I heard they took that they got a pretty good
Up
bump.
Yeah.
And I know that the city of Vancouver did too, and
Hey, Mr. Mayor.
they thought about
Mayor Harden.
jumping ship.
You want to drive to the five.
Counselor, I heard you got some vegetation maintenance.
Good to meet you.
My God, I took, I just put cones up, said, don't cut. I did.
Did you really?
Three of them.
Did they have inmates do it? or-
Yeah, they're inmates.
Yeah.
Whacking it, you know,
Yeah.
they took Fairview, they took the Fairview.
Oh, I saw that.
And a day later, and that's when I sent the note to Greg.
Yeah.
A
Yesterday.
day later, I'm looking down there.
That's awesome.
38. I see those guys, and so I said,
Yeah.
it's on my neighbor, Brian Wolf,
Right.
landscaper. And then on my other side is Jose. So, I checked with them because I said, you guys, well, Brian and I are on the same thing.
Yeah.
He's a landscaper. He has contracts for cities. He knows how to make.
This is Council President Nissen.
Anyway, talk to those guys, our other deputies. Oh, that's Jennifer. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Public Works Director.
Okay, you're the,
Congrats.
gonna be
I'm
here.
not taking over for Paul. I'm filling in today to kind of see how.
Okay,
things I need to.
all right.
He's on vacation.
Well, there you go. Boy, that cross training always pays off, doesn't it? Nice to have you
Nice to
here
meet
tonight. Coming down Sonder Deputy. I pulled up.
I don't want to third.
That's even make hate my. I know you guys are doing this. Yeah, there are 3 easements down there, in front of my house and my neighbor. I want you to come. Okay, I maintain, I understand, and I do this. Yeah, so I said, I'm gonna put cones out and I'll mark them.
Great if
They
they,
didn't touch it.
they don't bring the obstacle.
Well, they probably like that. They got to quit a little early.
Them to bring the obstacle close so they didn't have to blow things up and use guns anymore.
I
Change
look
the
at
image and the
them,
outreach a little bit. And now they're talking about not
and
having
that's
the obstacle
better
course.
than what they've done. And here's the thing, you know it, and we all know it because we listened to the
Oh,
theory behind it.
No, it's water quality.
Yeah.
They didn't do
Yeah.
it. And
No,
so what about all those inlets? I got pictures.
that
Oh,
much?
sorry. All the inlets,
I
they're all
bet.
debris in front of it. Yeah, vegetation growing out of those inlets.
That's the end today. You know
Where's the
what?
water's not even gonna go
Well,
in there.
Brian told me, Brian Wolf, he said, yeah, tell them not to cut it. He said, "What's gonna happen with those weeds, if the way they plant poison, right? He says, it'll choke out.
Apparently nobody else got the memo.
He says, what's gonna happen now?
I was like,
They're taking
photos tonight,
county,
Bruce,
it's
where
gonna
was,
propagate.
oh, shit. It's sunny outside.
Before you.
Yes,
true.
Before you started here, we had a night where every counselor
well, they had.
wore a
to.
Hawaiian
So
shirt and to
I
match
actually emailed the
counselor.
water quality guy over at the county. He hasn't emailed me back. He's usually pretty on top of that
Yeah,
stuff.
I think it was a.
I'll reach out to him again this week.
John, he's got this. I mean, to
Yeah,
me.
Sure, but I wore it to
Their
work
violation,
3 Fridays ago.
that was a federal.
We have one, I do have one more needed.
No, you're right.
And that was designed
We break,
on
Yeah,
EPA standards. I
Oh, we
believe.
might not
And
be
they're
able to
supposed to
break for the
maintain
summer,
it to
Yeah.
those standards.
or you might have
I think they said
for a couple of bid awards,
Yes.
Okay.
for
but
us.
won't.
And
You know, but
and
every,
the thing is-
every neighbor now.
yeah, all
A
the.
couple of things on the
vegetation
July
in front of us.
28th
I got some pictures.
agenda that
I
aren't
sent him over
fully
there and
cooked
said,
yet.
What are you guys doing? Yeah. This is not maintenance.
Trying to put.
You're cutting it. This is
bit of
not
work
maintenance.
stuff
No,
together.
no,
It's a
maintaining
tight time.
your
Turn around, trying to get.
water quality standards.
Oh, okay.
No,
Right.
John, this thing is, it's just, I
right.
was just. I was just.
I know.
6:01, so even I, the order, I apologize. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that Councilor Amanda is with us this evening. She's joining the meeting virtually. And we will begin as we do with our land acknowledgement statement. The Chinookan peoples, known as the Clackamas and Cascades, are the indigenous people of the land now inhabited by the city of Wood Village and other areas of the Columbia River. The village of Nechakli was located near today's Blue Lake Park. Ancestral life of these people included a seasonal round of resource gathering and stewardship from the Wapato fields and fishing areas of the Columbia River to the Cedar and Huckleberry gathering areas of the High Cascades. Introduced disease from early settlers dramatically reduced the number of these people. They signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 with the United States government and were forcibly removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous Native American families today. We are honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders, and families who are demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity, and we are honored to be guests upon these lands. And now we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
With liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Now we'll open the floor for citizen comment on non-agenda items. Greg, was any?
We did not have any online or phone in or in-person requests this evening.
All right. Thank you, Craig. We'll close the floor then. And we will bring up Sergeant Gerkman for the public safety report. And it is in your packet.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me. It looks like in the month of June, there were 145 dispatch calls for service, which is a little bit under the monthly average, with 35 of them being considered high priority or emergency type calls. There was 194 self-initiated calls within the city of Wood Village, which is up a fair amount from the year's average, which is nice to see. If you look at the specific call types, it looks like those self-initiated activities were traffic stops. Traffic stops were up substantially for the second month in a row. Looks like about 50 or so traffic stops above the yearly average. I would pay tribute to that, just like last month, the warm weather, more people on the streets, as well as some of our traffic missions, our gun safety missions, stolen vehicle missions, a part of the sheriff's initiative, the enhanced policing initiative that's been going on. There were 13 traffic crashes within the city of Wood Village, and none of them resulting in significant injury or loss of life. There were a little bit more stolen vehicle recoveries in the city than normal. It looked like there were 6. And I guess that was just up from last month, which was 1. I guess 6 is about the average, but it was up substantially from the month prior. However, there were only 3 vehicles reported stolen within the city, which is down from the average. So more vehicles recovered than stolen, but only 3 stolen. Looking through the call log, only one call kind of jumped out at me as significant. And I think we talked about it last month, the tactical incident on 237th. Yeah, the mental health issue. So that was thankfully resolved. We had crisis negotiators come out and it was resolved with a minimal amount of force used, but it was a person experiencing mental health crisis with a samurai sword and waving it around and breaking windows to his house. So that's all I have for you.
Any questions, Council President Nissen?
No questions. Thanks, Sergeant.
Councilor Minor?
Well, just a real general question on the traffic accidents and this chart here from 2012.
Mhm.
You know, it struck me that when I was looking at this, that we have more people, more traffic. And since 2012, accidents have gone down and the trend continues to go down.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen that. Well, I guess you've had it here, but I looked at it this time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you hope it's due to like proper city planning and traffic planning, making new, stop signs or better signage, lower speed limits, things like that.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. And I happen to sit on the East Multnomah County Transportation Committee. But I'm going to include this in my report next year or next week.
Yeah.
Because, it just surprises me that we're able to do that. And I don't know if that's common across the country or not.
You can give all the credit to the sheriff's office.
I think right now, I think you're leading the nation.
Yeah. Right.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Councilor Rios Campos?
No questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Amen?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. And I'm good tonight as well, Sergeant Griffin.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Sergeant, I would even go further. I think it's since you've been on that shift.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank
Thank you. And I just need a couple more minutes with the sergeant, so I'll be right back.
Thank you. All right. So next up is a review of bills paid. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the bills on the top sheet or the bills on the list?
No questions.
Okay. All right. Next up then is the consent calendar. Any questions or issues with anything on the consent calendar? I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I'm sorry, Councilman, we didn't hear you out there. Did you say aye?
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry,
It's all
a
right.
little late with the mute button.
All right, so then next up we have well, we have a meeting where we're gonna have another couple-minute pause. Because next on the agenda is the holiday food drives discussion with Greg.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to skip ahead to the master fee schedule with Seth,
Sure.
if he's prepared to go early?
He's our, he's,
This is becoming a trend.
that's right. He's getting good at this.
Let me, we'll call him what, like designated hitter. We can just throw him in whenever
That's
we
right.
need to.
Yeah, yeah.
Whenever you need someone to come up here and fill time.
Just out of curiosity, what IP address do these tablets call home? Because the weather says rain off and on. Look at
You're
it.
right. Hmm.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Before you tonight, we have resolution 1720-2022. A update to the master fee schedule. So a little bit of background. The last time we updated the master fee schedule for the building permits was on April 25th, 2019. That's when we created this document. It put all of our fees into one document. It allows us to keep track of them and make sure we're updating them as needed. And the last increase to any of our fees was approved at your first July meeting last year for utility rate increases that would take effect January 1st, 2020. And that was a 2% increase. Typically for the utilities, we increase it by whatever the CPI is. So there's going to be two main changes that are covered as part of this resolution. I will mention that the SDC rates are on your agenda as resolution 18-2022. Those are also incorporated as part of the master fee schedule, but you'll get a separate PowerPoint on those. So the two changes that I wanted to talk about as part of this resolution were, again, updating the utility rates. These ones would be, if you pass this this evening, those would be effective January 1st, 2023. And then updated building fees. I wanted to talk about this one a little bit. So we last increased the building fees in June of 2019. Since then, I believe the city of Gresham has made two changes to their fee structure. At that point, we had kind of aligned, and Deanne and Marie had taken a look at kind of our fee structure and made sure that we were as close in alignment with the city of Gresham as possible, so that it made things simpler, both for developers and for staff. And then the other reason for that, the other discussion that we had at that time was council had directed staff to continue to keep some of the charges, especially the minimums, low in order to facilitate homeowners coming in and going through the process of getting everything permitted when they were doing remodel or updates to their house. So that's kind of been one of the driving forces that we, as we look through our fees, we continue to try and implement that direction that council gave at that time. If approved tonight, these fees would be effective once we submit them to the state's building code division. So first off, I wanted to talk about the utility increases. So this is a graph of the CPI, Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. And as you can see, the area that's going to be covered by our proposed increase tonight is the area highlighted in yellow. So I mentioned that at our last rate increase, it was a 2% increase. Since then, inflation has increased, and we measure from January to January, and that increase was 7.5% from January 2021 to January 2022. I know that in the past, we've done some different things, either holding the base fee constant and changing the variable fee, or shifting the proposed rate increase between water and sewer. This year, we haven't proposed anything complicated. It's just a straight 7.5% increase to water, sewer, and street. With the caveat that once we actually have completed the master planning process and developed a utility rate model, rather than just basing cost increases off of the general consumer price increases that cover a very large basket of goods, the utility rate model will allow us to be based on all the operating and capital costs just for our own utilities. So it should give a much closer picture of what our actual costs are, rather than just indexing it by the consumer price index every year.
So do I understand it correctly, Seth? Then the master plan will give us a formula that we can plug in instead of.
Yeah, it'll really break our costs down into three buckets, kind of our operations, ongoing maintenance, and then the piece of the master plan is filling in is the large capital projects. And so once we know, have a good idea about what those three buckets are, we'll be able to kind of build a forecast and see what we need to do with our utility rates to make sure that we're delivering services.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This is what a typical rate increase would look like for a single family residential household that uses 6 units of water a month. Right now they pay about $99. This would go up to $107, which 7.5%. It's about what that works out to. So I wanted to pause here and see if you guys had any questions or comments about the proposed utility rate increases.
Well, one quick question. How can we do January to January instead of July to July, like all the rest of our budgeting and everything else that we base things on around here?
There's I don't know if we use it here, but within the accounting world, there's a term called SALY. It's the same as last year. I think that it's just been the way that we've done well, and we've generally aligned that because our union contract is based off of the January CPI. And so that cost of living increase kicks in July 1st.
Staff has also pointed out before, and I think in the staff report tonight, that it's a low use month, also January, for water sewer. And so it's a little bit easier for people to absorb the increase in a low use month.
That was going to be my point, is then that tends to be just base consumption months and gives people an opportunity to, normalize the rate before higher consumption periods.
Great, thank you.
Since the large capital projects would probably be influenced greatly by that huge increase in the cost of living, is the new formula likely to offer any sort of relief, or is it still going to be pretty close to 7% if we have another year like we had this past year?
My experience is that over the long term, it will probably track with inflation, but a lot of that depends on how big of a capital need there is in the future. And what the utility rate model allows you to do is ramp up for when there are large capital projects, and then ramp down or when there are smaller projects. The best example I can give is Portland Water Bureau for a number of years tracked below inflation because they were able to hold their operating costs down. But when they started, putting in some seismic lines, doing the reservoirs on Foul Butte, getting rid of Mount Tabor and the Washington Park ones, you saw rates start to increase above inflation. I think if you look at it over a 20 or 30-year period, it probably comes out pretty even with what the consumer price index is.
And another interesting factor is, what kind of deferred maintenance has the organization placed on their utilities and what they may have to now catch up on that. We're seeing in a lot of jurisdictions that held down rates for a number of years are now doing multiple years of double-digit increases on top of, just general cost of living increases just to make their systems up to par, which ours generally, and our master plan will be a little more specific, but generally we've been maintaining them quite well and shouldn't be too many surprises. I mean, short of our upcoming SCADA work, there shouldn't be a lot of wow moments.
Yeah.
Well, and really along with the same thoughts there, 7.5% increase in the first year, followed by a price increase that is based on the actual cost of us delivering that utility. The better we can keep our system, the better we maintain that, the less our operating costs are going to be, and therefore less cost for our residents in the future. So I think the process here that I hear us talking about makes sense to me. So.
All right. So that's the utility rate portion. And again, I'll pause at the end and if there's any other questions that come up between now and then. The second part of the ordinance that's incorporated in your master fee schedule that's included with your staff report is to increase building fees. And I just want to kind of remind everyone of what the process was. So tonight we're going to be asking for a resolution. After that, the proposed fee increase with supporting documentation will be supported to the Gresham building official. They will review it and then they will submit it to the state building code division. At that point, it starts a waiting period for public comment. Council is then required to hold a public hearing and adopt an ordinance to actually approve the rates. And then the rates would then be effective whenever that building code division review period is over. So this is based on what it took last time we came to you. And that was in April of 2019. We came to you with the resolution in April 2019. The rates weren't actually effective until I believe mid-July of that year. So it took about 2.5 or 3 months for the process to work out. This is what we would anticipate, knock on wood, this go around as our building official and the state's building code division do their reviews. So that's the process. What are we actually including? So there's 5 main changes that are being proposed tonight. The first is just an update for the hourly billing rate that Gresham passes through. We pass through from them. A number of their fees, if you want to have additional hours or additional amenities or additional things that are above and beyond your typical permit, you pay at an hourly rate. Since we last did the update in 2019, Gresham's increased that hourly rate from $94 to $150. Now, what I will say is that we typically don't see a lot of these, especially on routine permits. And generally, we only see it where the permits have basically used up all of the time that was included with the application or are asking for things like temporary or extension of an extension for timelines, or if, they're coming out, the inspectors are having to come out 3, 4, 5 times to do the same inspection. And basically those are ones that have basically just keeping pace with inflation since 2019. So kind of my rule of thumb was if it's under 10% over the last 3 years, it's just an inflationary catch up that Gresham was paying. And it made prudent sense for us to also make sure that we're not falling behind on that. That's the first change. The second one is some fee consolidation. These are where Gresham changed their methodology. So An example of this is for sprinklers. Sprinkler permits used to have a standalone and multi-purpose, used to be split into one category. They just kind of pushed them together and I guess took the average. So they're not, these are ones where they're not necessarily looking to gain additional revenue. We're just trying to simplify the fee structure and process. So there was this one, and then there was one for mechanical that basically said, we used to have wood stoves, flues, heat pumps, alterations. They all had their own fee structure. Now it's just pay $35 if you're doing any one of these. It's kind of a way, again, a way of trying to simplify the process. So those are a couple of examples of where there's some fee consolidations where when we reviewed it with our staff, we didn't feel like they were trying to get more revenue. They were just trying to make things less complicated. There were two areas that did have some additional costs above and beyond inflation related to new construction for electrical and plumbing. So for electrical services, those cost increases were more than what we would typically expect for inflation. And then for plumbing permits, again, it's instead of a 10% increase, you're looking kind of more of a 15 to 20% increase. And we did reach out to kind of ask Gresham about that. And we were assuming that they were getting some feedback that their permit cost wasn't actually covering their time and materials for those. And since those were also on new construction, rather than kind of updating or remodeling, we felt that that was probably prudent for us to do as well. So I'll stop here and see. We're about halfway through. Is there any questions on the building changes so far?
Just a comment. It's interesting that, wood and pellet stoves are even still included in the permitting process, given the county's, push to, include, fireplaces and stoves and things like that in their burn bans, and have so many days where they can't be used unless it's the home's only source of heat.
Yeah. And I don't imagine that a lot of newer homes are wood heated only. But yeah, there's definitely some things that could be cleaned up, and hopefully in future revisions, we'll get that all squared away.
Also, one thing that, there's just a handful of things where I didn't want to really spend a lot of time on them tonight. But just to think about them for the retreat and for next year. And one of them is around that gas fee, and it's highlighted in blue. So you mentioned that it already went up. But later when we talk about the legislative agenda, one of the proposed is the decarbonization, and not, basically encouraging people to build with electric only and not use natural gas anymore. And so I'm wondering, well, that's not one of my top agenda items, if we don't want to maybe increase that fee to help with that decarbonization effort, and then maybe lower solar a little bit fees in order to encourage people to go electric, but with renewable.
Yeah, that's something we can take a look at. I would say that I don't know how that would go with the state. Building Codes Division we have to submit documentation that we are only recovering costs that are necessary for doing the permitting. I don't know that we would necessarily be able to explicitly try and make a policy change through our building code fees, but that's just not something we've ever considered. I'm not sure how that would affect the BCD review process, absent some sort of action from the legislature enabling that.
And it's certainly worth a retreat, future retreat discussion about, call it just construction in Wood Village. It's not becoming uncommon for cities to start prohibiting certain types of fuel sources for new construction primarily, not necessarily replacing in kind and the like, but certainly new construction, looking at electric only or a certain amount of solar.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would second that we have a discussion at the retreat, how to create some incentives for a less carbon footprint type of construction. So,
yeah. The last two changes that are incorporated within the building fees are we added a section covering solar installations for residential and commercial. It was just a section that had to fit under a specialty or miscellaneous before. It didn't have its own call out, but the proposed section breaks it out in terms of kilowatt hours fee structure. And then finally, for fees where we aren't synced up with Gresham, we had some where we had some leftover cents. We just rounded those to the nearest dollar. So those are kind of the 5 types of changes that you'll see coming through the backup schedule. It was attached as part of the packet.
Seth, someplace in here, and it's more of a philosophical, maybe just a consideration here. Now I can't find it now, but the square footage of what you're going to build drives your building permit cost. And I saw the breakdown.
Yeah.
And I had it here in Wood Village, and then there's the other permit fees too. But when I saw that square footage cost and looked at that we all know how much materials cost now. And we all know how much labor costs. That doesn't mean that's cost is automatically transferred onto the permitting agency. So in some cases, and again, I'm not asking for a full discussion on this, nor for us to push back on it, but it does seem like sometimes those kinds of fees that are based on numbers that have to do with how much something is costing, which is driven by materials, not complicated engineering that needs multiple inspections, but just driven by simple material costs. Seems like it doesn't always seem like it's equitable. So,
And there are, like you said, there are some that are valuation-based permit fees, and there's generally, we generally take whoever's applying at their word for it and kind of, does it seem reasonable? And there's a couple examples where if it's not, we take it to the building official and they have their kind of, books and records and things, because some people, just because maybe someone overpaid for labor or picked an exotic material, that doesn't necessarily translate to what that value is for the project. Just because you spent $500 an hour on labor doesn't mean the actual value was, $50. The flip side is we've had people turn in ridiculously low valuations, essentially rebuilding an entire home, saying the value is $1,500. We're like, no, that's not. So it is something we do spot check, but it's also something that's based on reasonable and prudent kind of, it's a bathroom remodel. Well, maybe they're spending 30, but a bathroom remodel is only going to go so far in terms of valuation to the home itself.
yeah.
The other thing I would say, Councilor Minor, is that Gresham's system, which is different than ours, when we talked to you in 2019 about our building permits, we let you know that on the smaller permits, we tended to lose money. We weren't recovering our costs. And that was a decision the council made, that you guys were all comfortable with the general fund subsidizing the lower cost permits and doing a little more hand holding when someone comes in the door who might not necessarily know the system but needs to get there. Gresham, over the long run, is a the revenues in have to equal their costs. It's maybe short term, they might be able to build up some fund balance, but they are not they have not given the direction that their general fund will support any of their building activities. So and really that's another part of why BCD reviews our proposed fee changes is developers get fairly sensitive around building permits and SDC costs to make sure that there's not any additional cost. It's not a moneymaker for cities, and there's no additional costs that go in other than the cost of providing a service. So, but it's something worth taking a look at.
I just saw it in there, and I saw it for Gresham.
Yeah.
So anyway.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then that concludes my presentation.
I would entertain that motion on, let's see, did you move? Councilor Mendigan? Thank you.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion on resolution 17-2022.
I move to approve resolution 17-2022, a resolution updating the master fee schedule, including adjusting building fees and water, sewer, and street utility fees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Seth, since you're in the hot seat, you want to just keep going with the STC rate increase?
Sure, that would be wonderful. Then I can be done and go back to relaxing at the day and the side days. With paying rapt attention rather than having to talk. Okay, so we are on the SDC. Shared setup. All right. So the other portion of what we generally come to you in the first part of July is to index our system development charges. So these are the charges that developers pay buying into our utility systems when they provide new construction. We have ones for water, sewer, and parks. Rather than increasing these for CPI, we typically use the engineering news report 20-cent average for construction. The last time we updated this was, and that's actually not accurate, we actually updated through May 2021. This is what the engineering news report increases look like over the last few years. And as you can see, we got it through May of 2021, which is this line. And since then, costs have gone up substantially. Looking over the last 12 months, that cost increases 8.4% rather than what we just talked about was the 7.5% for the consumer price index. So with that, we took our existing rates and existing schedule, put in that 8.4% and came up with proposed increases of for our standard meters and also for the commercial meters. And I would also point out for water and sewer, part of the master plan and utility rate modeling process is to update the SDC methodology and then propose that these fees would change based on the types of projects that we're planning on implementing over the next 15 years. So this is one that when we come back to you next year, we'll have a much better, much more specific cost basis rather than just indexing it by CPI or the engineering news report.
So it would be, potential increase would be tied to the cost of the projects, just like the potential increase in water and sewer is going to be tied to the cost of running the utility.
Yeah. And these, what we've done since I think 2012 for water and sewer is, again, with that master plan update, it was all based on a bundle of anticipated capital projects and anticipated development. And since then, we've been indexing it every year. So we'll kind of get a recalibration and see where we're at based on the projects that we have at the end of that process. And these are the ones for parks. You can see the increases are for single family resident, $250 for parks and about the same for water and sewer. Would be so overall it'd be an increase of about $750 for water and sewer and parks in STC costs for a typical single family residence. This increasing these in line with the engineering news report achieves goal 4 for the council: long-term financial stability, economic vitality, and growth. Alternatives, you can accept the fees as presented. You can adjust the fees based on another amount or type of indexing. You also have the ability to reject the proposed increase and keep the fees as they are. With that, that's all that I had for you on the system development charge increase.
How much room do we have left for more single family development?
Not much. There are a handful of parcels that could be kind of subdivided, put into single family. More than likely what we would see is, ADUs or a handful. I'm thinking in established neighborhoods, handful of other maybe like duplex, fourplex things. And then there with how we're currently zoned today, what's available today, probably the neighborhood of 150 to 200 kind of multifamily units. Most of those are on Halsey, and that's kind of ballparking what we've got as currently zoned, as currently, lands kind of sit. So for single family homes, probably less than 6.
I was gonna say 5.
Yeah.
We're in the
Then
ballpark.
ADUs or like a duplex addition. I think that's just going to depend on some economics, what people want to do. There's a lot of potential, but we've had that ability for quite some time and see few of those. So I'd probably say again, over the next 10 years, 200 units total between multifamily, single family.
All right, if there's no other questions or comments, entertain a motion on resolution 18-2022.
Go
ahead.
I move to approve resolution 18-2022, a resolution adjusting the water, sewer and park system development charges for the cost of living increases based on the engineering news report construction cost index.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Now we'll go back to the discussion of the holiday food drive with Greg. Thank you, Seth.
Yes, thank you.
I'm not as tall as Seth, apparently. Thank you very much for adjusting the item. I had to talk to Sergeant Gertman about the night out. They had some information come down from the top that they couldn't do their obstacle course. They had some liability concerns. And so luckily, Councilor Rios Campos came up with a elegant solution that'd be a Play East obstacle course, and just deputies might just happen to be there helping the kids, through it and doing it with the
Way
kids.
to go.
So they're going to run that past their upper leadership and see if that'll be acceptable.
Well, thank you, please.
Yeah.
A week in advance is a little bit short notice to change your mind, particularly if you don't have an alternative plan.
Yeah, that was that message was passed along.
Please, that's a liability insurance anyway.
Vote on one of the cities.
Well, it's
All right, but to the program at hand, our holiday meal programs and talking about those. So since the fall of 2020, the city has had what we called a turkey drive. And that was, the pandemic was certainly running rampant. People were out of work. There's a lot of need. And we had a person on our team that had operated a turkey drive at their former workplace. We said, well, that'd be a cool idea for here. So we gave it a go, and it really resonated with the community. We handed out frozen turkeys, about, call it 10 pounds, and then dry goods for side. So, canned corn, packaged mashed potatoes, gravy, I think canned cranberries, and then a couple things to bake, like some muffins or cornbread and things. That event not only continued last year, but was expanded to a winter holiday drive as well. And we also expanded both the meat options as the main, as well as options for sides. So for Thanksgiving, it was turkey or ham. And then for the winter holiday one, I want to say it was also still ham, but then chicken. And then the dry goods box had kind of a alternative, trying to be more culturally appropriate with like beans, rice, things that we'd heard from those community members that would be meaningful to them for their holiday. Each event served about 150 people. Pre-registration was required, and about 85% of those that pre-registered were there to pick up their meal box. We always had some reserves for walk-ups and then waitlist folks, so we never wasted the food. Well, it always found a good home, even though not everyone picked up their box or had it delivered. We still got it to where it needed to be. So while the events have been great and meaningful with the community, there's been some interesting logistical challenges with these ones, specifically, with food shortages. getting the food things was actually the challenge, whether it was ordering the dry goods or trying to procure enough of the meats. And with the meat came then storage of the meat. You couldn't order it too soon because we don't have freezer space. And so luckily our partner said, well, we'll store it for you. You could pick it up either night before or morning of. Relies on just a ton of volunteer help, kind of sorting through all the dry goods, putting together. I call them boxes. They're actually bags, reusable bags that then the guests actually get to use for later. But sorting through everything, putting those together, sorting them, and then staff time tracking signups, doing reminders to make sure people can get the bag or trying to set up arrangements to being picked up. And there's also requests to have different and more variety of food options. We saw even as we expanded, box A and box B, people said, well, I like half of box A and half of box B. Can I combine it? And certainly signups were also had to be so early. We would do signups in September for an event in November. I don't know about you. I tend not to think about Thanksgiving till like late October time. So it was unfortunate as people were, oh, Thanksgiving. Oh, the signups were, 2 months ago. There were just some interesting challenges as we navigated these newer food events for us. So while Em was still here, her and I talked about some things. We've been mentioning them to you all in kind of our debriefs. But one that recently kind of came up and sparked our interest was utilizing the East County Food Pantry, which also started very late 2020. So when we created our turkey drive here in 2020, I'm not sure they were actually up and running yet officially. They're still in their very infancy. And they provide support to Fairview, Woodville, Troutdale, parts of Gresham. They serve about 180 families right now. I think they start off about 140, and they've grown incrementally over the past couple of years. So in this past year, they also did a Thanksgiving meal program about the same time frame we did it, kind of that just week prior to, and they also served 150 families. So we thought, it was a thought of the council back in 2020. What about other food, providers? We don't want to duplicate efforts. Well, at the time, it was Snowcap was the only one, and there are a lot of limits, and we didn't think they were actually doing a kind of readily accessible holiday or Thanksgiving one. So we met with the East County Food Pantry leadership team, and they said, we can absolutely, if desired, to combine events and support even more people. So the idea would be combine the event, still brand it as, us and them, served just prior to Thanksgiving. Part of that's because you get the turkeys are about frozen as a solid thing of ice, and it takes a little time to thaw out. We'd still require registration. And again, that's ensuring there's enough of the stuff for all the people that attend. There'd be certainly a preference for Wood Village households, and we certainly would push that through our networks, newsletter, our other partners, to making sure that Wood Village people know this event is still going on. Simply the pickup location would be different, and who you sign up with. But you'd still go to our website. It'd be a link to their form, but they wouldn't necessarily know it's not us. And then we'd receive a post-event recap, not with addresses, but more like where did people come from in a general sense. And so we know where those resources went. So the idea is we would provide essentially the funds or any in-kind donations we receive, because we've already got verbal confirmation from Morash Meats they'd be willing to provide the turkeys again. So we'd provide food funds. There's still then opportunities. I know a lot of people like to volunteer at this event. It's a feel-good event. It's a way to connect with community members. Still opportunities to volunteer for those who want to. It simply wouldn't be necessarily on city staff shoulders to help organize and support, try to manage and run that. The other thing that would be beneficial is they also provide fresh items, produce, dairy, that we can't provide as part of ours that they do provide because they have refrigerated units and things. So options for increasing the variety of items people get. So what we're requesting is this direction from you all on the holiday events. Do you want to partner with the East County Food Pantry, hold it on our own as discussed, which would be we provide essentially the main meat and then a gift card for folks to go get their sides, and we will execute per your direction.
Well, I think even providing the main meat and the gift card as the side kind of only solves one of the problems and maybe not the biggest one. You know, I had 4 deliveries at Christmas that weren't home. And I was having to leave a chicken in each case that was already starting to get a little soft on somebody's front patio. And, you know, I'm not sure, you know, if they got home from work 6 hours after that, if I'd have braved eating that chicken. And then, you know, I mean, it's, I think this just kind of would cement an already valuable partnership. You know, as a reminder, council voted for $2,000 to fund last year's food to, you know, make our contribution to getting that started. Greg and I served on a board along with a couple other city managers and Mayor Cooper and Commissioner Stegman, and, you know, figured out how to, you know, get them the deal on the freezer and refrigerator vehicles. And I think we got union electricians to wire them. And so, you know, we've been, you know, working with them, you know, maybe not all along, but very hard at the start. And so I think that this is a way to kind of jump back in the game a little bit with them.
And I'll tell you, it's, I wouldn't want to take a wild guess on how much staff time it takes to pull this off. And I'll tell you, I kind of think about this. Let's stay in our lane here. If we have the East County Food Bank that is doing this, let's support them and give them the money we might have normally spent, help them. And as the mayor said, I think it'd be a great support for the East County Food Bank. It centralizes those services for our communities here. It certainly, the redundancy of this is, you know, we don't need to do that. In my mind, and target use of our resources. Our contribution monetarily will go to that, and it targets that. So I think it's a great idea. But, you know, so I'm absolutely supportive, and it still gives us all a chance to go down there and help serve and do our volunteer and wear our badges, and they know that, you know, the city council from Wood Village is all participating.
And they do still support drive-by deliveries too. They have teams that do deliveries, so.
And in fact, it's be a good way to get to know the program, because I think anytime you have a spare Saturday, they probably, they need volunteers on a pretty regular basis.
Or spare Friday morning when they put all their stuff together.
I do view this a little different. And the reason I say I view this a little different, being present during the assembly of the bags and being a little bit more hands-on in this project, the benefit that doing it in-house brings is the strengthening and partnership between the city and our community. So all our volunteers that we had, which we had anywhere from 10 to 20 from the community, you know, not that they probably couldn't, but now we're saying, if you want to volunteer for this particular event, you have to go here now. So while we were constructing and building that relationship here, where now they do feel comfortable coming here, now they do want to come here, and not that in a way it feels like we're stripping them of that. I would like to maybe find a different form of seeing how our partnerships between other agencies, either Play East or the natural leaders, can help out and support staff maybe a little bit more. And maybe even go the route like the mayor mentioned before, where we do offer the meat and then a gift card. So logistically, it is a lot less, you know, a lot less staff time, because they're not having to look for each individual item, ensuring that it gets delivered, then packaging and things like that. It's, you know, we already have the commitment from Morash. It's just someone having to go purchase the gift card and then assembling the day of the event to distribute the meals and then organize deliveries, which I feel could be a little bit more less on staff and things of that nature. But I think the benefit of what we've done over the last few years is that as a city, we've not only served our city, we've served the neighboring cities, and to a degree, I think this is where the food pantry did get the idea from. So I think there is a lot of benefit to doing it in-house, and I would like to see us continue that because I continue to hear that from the community. Oh, we're so grateful that the city gave us, a meal for the holidays. And so not that we have to be the forefront, but I think it's those other things behind the scenes that we've also done because of these events. So establish those relationships with those community members.
I guess it's my turn to play Johnny Cash and walk the line. I completely agree that lessening the burden on staff, and I like the idea of having the food pantry or partnering with them. But then Councilor Rios Campos brought up some great points. What about the possibility of partnering with the food bank for one of the events, and then having us as the city handle the other one? It's going to reduce our staff and volunteer time versus handling both of them. We kind of accomplish everything, yet we're still able to bring community members in and get their buy-in, get their volunteer time, and bring them into a welcoming city hall as well.
And I also recognize Councilor Rios Campos and what you're saying. Here's where, and I'm going to take a little piece of Councilor Nissen there. I believe this is one of those that is intensive enough that this one seems fit for the East County Food Bank. And there are still opportunities to volunteer. But I think it's good to recognize what you're saying. We have 8 or 9 events during the year now. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but it isn't.
I don't know either.
It's not
I
3 or
should,
4.
but
So I think that trying to respect the natural helpers and the relationships that are being built there, that we look for those, some of those areas where perhaps there can be an expansion there of what we might do. But to me, this is a hard one for me to say that the city should be doing this. The city, I believe, should be doing all the things we're doing, the Easter egg hunt, tree lighting, I forget them. We got the
Pumpkin Fest.
Pumpkin Fest,
Family Fun Friday.
Night Out.
Night Out.
Those are all great things, and they're all opportunities for people to get involved. And but this one to me is really a stretch for us as a city to try to maintain this year after year after year after year. So but I do respect the idea that we need to continue to build the relationships that we are building and that you've been instrumental in bringing to the city.
And I guess my question for that is it just because the staffer that was lead of it isn't here anymore? Because I believe if that individual was here, we would continue to do that as a city.
It was her idea to not to.
Was that?
It was her idea to not to. It was a lot of pressure on.
I would be saying the same thing whether she was here or not, because I already had questions about how many events that we're trying to do in this city. I have for a number of years. I think we do a great job for the city, but I think that we keep growing that. And I think we just don't have the capacity. And this is one of them that I think is a natural partnership with the East County Food Bank.
And I don't know where the relationship is now between the natural leaders and Smith Memorial, if they do any work there at all, or, if we wanted to encourage them to join the volunteer effort down there and they agreed, I certainly would go with them. And I would encourage any of us to. I wouldn't suggest that we do it this year, but one of the reasons we've had to go 2 meats, 2 bags, boxes was in an effort to become more culturally significant to people in terms of the food. And, maybe we turn these two sort of, for lack of a better word, Anglo traditional meals, Thanksgiving and Christmas. They don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Mexico, right? And so over to the food bank. And then in 2023, we look at doing something around Day of the Dead or Revolution Day or something like that. And because we are 41% Latino, and because, while we still want to continue to build that trust, I think we need to build the rest of our population's sort of knowledge of, the things that are culturally significant to nearly half of our population. And so maybe we build an event at the retreat that focuses on, primarily on our Latino community. And it doesn't have to be a Mexican holiday. It could be a November Honduran celebration or Guatemalan or whatever, and work it out that way. Have something that instead of saying we want to make it culturally significant for you, we'd like your help to do something that's culturally significant for you, for everyone.
Well, I certainly like the idea of asking the natural helpers and posing that question of what would it look like for the city to do a cultural specific event. We've been doing some of that, but I don't know whether it'd be a replacement for this, but certainly I agree with the events we're having. They're not always culturally specific. Doesn't mean that our population doesn't generally participate in it. So.
I wonder if Councilor Mend has comments to share.
I don't really. I do feel pretty strongly that as much as we can help people with food and resources like that, we can and should, but I understand that our resources are limited. So in whatever way we can help agencies that provide those resources, I think is a great idea.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, does the East Pantry only do Thanksgiving, or do they also do other
That was
holiday
going to be my thing. I hedge, ask my team. I play it right safe down the middle. I was like, well, they're already doing a Thanksgiving one. That could be a nice, call it beta test. Partnership beta test, continue it, a little less staff burden, but then do our winter one in-house with, a meat option, gift card, and just kind of really evaluate both, the staff resources, community, call it feedback, and then volunteer kind of what did the meaningful, did some go to the other side? Did some come here? What does that look like? And just evaluate it on a holistic level.
Because if we do want to talk about culturally specific, yes. So Thanksgiving is probably more of a, an United States American holiday, but Christmas is more global. And so I think there could be some synergy around maybe we don't do Thanksgiving as it is more heavier here logistically and all these other reasons why, and do the focus for Christmas or the holiday, sorry. And have that, because I think it, the East County Pantry is great and all, but I'm not too sure that a lot of our residents know about that resource. I think they're more aware of the once a month that the Baptist Church does versus the every week that they do. And so it could be a great opportunity to share that resource.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, but I think there's, even though it was, time heavy on staff and things like that, but I think there's a lot of benefit to continue to at least do one of those events that we were doing.
Christmas was particularly hard on Em because I was the only one that volunteered to do deliveries. And so she'd put together like 20 deliveries for me. I felt bad for her, not bad enough to help her, mind you, but I felt bad for her because after the event was over, she'd go out and do deliveries and she was doing like double the number of deliveries that I was doing. So, you know, if we're gonna continue to deliver, we're gonna need 2 or 3 drivers.
And that was the tricky part also, you know, we had the Thanksgiving one, you know, the week prior to Christmas. It was only about 3.5, 4 weeks later, we did another one. So, you know, having Salt City doing one, maybe we'll get the core group of volunteers are not spread too thin. It's okay, here's the city event. Here's this other opportunity, certainly. And then also because you have the Thanksgiving drive, the tree lighting, and then the holiday drive all hitting within, 4 weeks, lessening that.
And I think maybe also we restructure how the application was and, focus more on not, those that are in need of delivery, make them more local. So you're not having to go to 92nd in division or 122nd because I was looking at those lists as well, and I understand that piece, and so I understand that other folks benefited from our city resources, but again, like Greg mentioned, really focus it more here. So deliveries do only happen here
In the city.
within the city, and if you are out of town resident and need that, look for other means or maybe a neighbor or somebody else can do this.
Or maybe one of the volunteers lives nearby.
Exactly.
And, it's not a hassle for them to take a couple on their way home, drop it off at a few
Well,
spots.
you remember the comment the mayor made, leaving 2 chickens on somebody's desk, or excuse me, somebody's porch.
Yeah.
That isn't what we want to do. We're taking responsibility when we're handing out food that it's edible, it's safe. So I think we got to be a little careful here about this conversation and how much we can do. I continue though, I continue to want, the last thing that I want to, and I think any of us want to do, is send the wrong message to the outreach we've made so far with natural helpers or others. That isn't what this should be. And that East County Food Bank should be known by people. And if this can help our population know it's there, the resources can only grow. I mean, we can't continue to grow this effort of the food, but we can grow the East County Food Bank so it can grow with our population and our population's needs. So I really want to continue, Councilor Rio Campos, making sure that our outreach so far, that this decision, if that's the decision we make, is not in any way a message that they're not important in our city.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, to continue to build off what has been done these last 2 years.
Yeah.
Because again, the bulk of those volunteers do help out in a number of other events. So all the bagging that had happened these last 2 years was thanks to those individuals. If it wasn't for those, more staff resource time would have been dealt to do those. And so just looking at ways to just build off what we've done existing.
I agree with that.
The only question I have about turning over one or more events to them is that there are element stars that are unique. Would they mind stuffing like resource guides, for instance?
I'm pretty sure they
necessarily
wouldn't mind
unique
if
to Wood Village.
if we gave the materials. I would be very surprised if they wouldn't mind having those as part of the bags or boxes or how they do their thing. I'd be very surprised if they had issue with that.
Because I'd like to see that happen. And so, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion is a little bit vague. It's as discussed, and we've discussed a number of options. And so do we want to have the motion that both meal drives are done by the pantry? Or do we want to have the motion that we partner with the pantry for Thanksgiving and that we do Christmas on our own? Keeping in mind that
I'm in,
tree
I'm
lighting
in,
and every, it's
I'm in
close to
favor of
Christmas.
easing into the water and having the pantry do Thanksgiving
Oh, yeah.
and us handle the Christmas one and see how that plays out this year. And then discussing it again next year.
What, the suggested motion, move to approve the 2022 holiday meal box program as discussed. Was that both?
Yes, that was for the meal programs. Yes,
Got it.
Thanksgiving, winter holiday. And it sounds like the question is,
I think if we want to split them, we'd have to
Yeah, split
tailor the
them.
motion that way.
I would second Counselor Nissen's motion.
So just as a
Well,
friendly add on, Councilor Nissen was his motion was to split them.
yeah,
Do we have a motion and a second? Any further discussion?
yeah, I think I would be in favor of both of them. As a matter of compromise, if we feel that we need to try it out first, or there is we're moving too fast for messages to the community, then I can accept the one, but I would support moving both at this time.
And I feel that if we move one and they do back off, they don't want to stuff our resource guides in there or there's some other glitch. I can't imagine there would be, but if there is, that gives us the opportunity next year we haven't completely turned off the highway. We're easing down the frontage road, and if we need to get back onto the highway and the next year handle everything ourselves, then we've got that opportunity.
and we'll
Well, let
purposely
me ask-
track the staff time in the winter one, even I'll call it the abbreviated one where it's, a main and then a gift card for sides. We'll still see what the staff effort and involvement was and make
Well, and we're going to do that anyway. We're going to know if it goes off the trail, off the road in the first one. So we would have that opportunity anyway to make some adjustments. So, but tracking it, well,
And I also think it provides a great ease into having, our community volunteers get to know the leadership at the East County Pantry, and then they can also, take lead in some of these projects as they've taken lead here. And so I think that's more of the importance of easing in instead of just saying, boom, here you go now. So we can start having those conversations with that leadership and say, we have a core group of volunteers that we would hope that you guys could incorporate with your existing group of volunteers, because they have a core group also, and then start that relationship building.
well, how about if we, after this Thanksgiving, we see how it goes, and if we can get some feedback, and if we can, if it goes well, and we know their support, and our citizens, our residents are willing to say, hey, this worked out pretty well. Now we can do some other events. Because really, I haven't bagged up a lot of stuff. I have a couple of times, but I'm not, it just isn't something I do all the time, and I'll come to the events, but I help set up some of it. But I just think on this one, if we can see how it goes and maybe proceed with it, if it goes well, do the Christmas one too. I can accept that.
Well, and just to see if you don't have to, because I want to ask Jeff this question. So I've seen it happen before. Maybe it wasn't right. If the first motion is to split them and it loses, then we can consider Councilor Minor's motion for both, right?
Yes, you can.
You know,
Maybe amend it.
maybe you won't have to compromise. So I think, so,
Amend that.
well, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Okay,
And so, we'll take the vote on splitting them. And if that vote were to lose, then we'd entertain the motion to do both.
yeah, that's fair.
All right. Okay, so motioned and second to split them. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
With
And
the-
Councillor Mann?
I'm a little confused. So we're Thanksgiving, we're giving to the East Pantry, the East County Pantry, and then we'll do Christmas. That's the motion, is Christmas on our own?
That's correct.
Okay,
Well-
my aye.
Aye. Okay, so then the motion carries by a vote of 4-1.
Now, the motion has been carried. But the discussion, I want to make sure it's in our minutes, is that we're coming back here after the Thanksgiving. And we're then going to evaluate if we're going to move forward with the Christmas.
Yeah, you're 3 weeks.
Before, yeah. The,
Okay, so that
We'll certainly bring back
October is when
the
the
evaluation
sign-up
of the
would begin.
Thanksgiving one, but it's too late to then change the plan for the holiday one because it'd go out less than 3 weeks later.
yeah, the signups start in October.
well, I probably would have voted different, but I thought the discussion was that there would be time.
And
But-
I think that was also part of the staff like taking on so much because it was roll one out and then a few weeks later, roll the other one out. So in a sense, they were juggling both at the
And you
same
had,
time.
2 concurrent signups, one for Thanksgiving, a separate one for winter. But we'll certainly bring back, feedback from the Thanksgiving one that could be used for following year's decision.
And last year was the natural leaders that led to a lot of the Christmas signups because Teresa had the sign up form at the vaccine drives. And if you came in to get your shot, it was have you sign up for dinner yet? And so, yeah.
Get a shot, and would you like ham or turkey with that?
And, in another place, though, that I think, to Councilor Minor's credit, that where we could come back and have the discussion, is that, maybe instead of, the main being 2 meats, it's 1 meat.
It's one meat.
And it's not chicken. And because of its delicateness, but maybe it's, carne asada and not turkey. Because I think that, we're doing the right thing by developing culturally significant things for our population from different cultures, but we're not leaning on or pushing on, what people would term the dominant white culture to learn more about the other people that live here.
Well, even like for like Christmas, ham, I
Honestly,
think.
ham was actually really quite
Universal.
popular
Yeah,
and it's
ham,
already
yeah.
cured.
All right.
Yeah, it was more of the turkey, not understanding how to prepare it and things like that, because it's so untraditional, but a ham, it is a little bit, I think, more universal and even it crosses over to in the Europeans and things like
Yeah.
that.
Well,
And not as dangerous.
And
Yeah.
so I see our discussion after Thanksgiving, talking about all these things and talking about the breadth of what we can do for Christmas. And if there's not enough time to do certain things, then we narrow it down. And if we have lots of help and we have the time and we can do it, then we build that robust as we can resource wise.
Well, I would still lean more towards having 1 meat and a gift card.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah, 1 meat
simplify
and a
it
gift
because
card,
we
yeah.
are filling the needs and now they are able to go buy whatever, I don't want these canned yams or whatever the case may be. I think it really simplifies not only for staff, but just
Well, and
in nature at all.
Two meat options cause a lot of problem because the providers need nowadays 2.5 months lead time.
Exactly.
If we already know it's going to be ham or whatever, we could order, we need 150 hams on this date.
Exactly.
Whether or not we hand them out, whether or not then we turn them over to East County Food Pantry, doesn't really matter at that point because we have the main thing.
Yeah.
If ham is universal, it seems like that's gonna simplify
Well,
things a lot.
I'm ready to say, we'll go buy hams. If we have to have that kind of lead time.
I think that was talking with them last year, that was kind of hopefully the direction that we would lean towards this year, was really simplifying because of just everything. Just the supply and demand wasn't there as years before. So we understand that portion of it. So simplifying everything, because again, we're not going to fulfill everybody's wishes and desires. You know, my wishes and desires are so different than my neighbors. And we could be from the same culture, is they're just different. And so just saying we're gonna supply the main course, which is the meat, and here's $25, do with it what you can. Then that's what you do, because we had people saying, well, we want a dessert. It's like, well, we
Go buy it.
have that right now. So
Good.
Well, I do want to say though, I want to reach a time where instead of like 4 or 5 of the national leaders coming to me and saying, hey, can we do something besides turkey? Because we've never cooked a turkey before. We don't know how. I want my across the street neighbor to come over to me and say, you know, strip steak, I've never made this before. How do I do it? You know, I want it to go the other way.
I think looking at the holidays it's a little bit, it's just different. So
Hectic,
steak, I mean,
hectic enough already.
yeah.
Well, let's see how it goes. Let's see how the East County Food Bank does.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be a nice ease into it. And then, you know, we'll have a plan for the holiday one and see how that goes as well.
Okay,
I'm getting out of this seat.
that's right. Well, for a little. You'll be replaced by John for a presentation on resolution 19-2022, Multnomah County IGA for crosswalk maintenance. This one has cool pictures.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors. I'm here to present to you Resolution 19-2022, authorizing the city manager to execute an IGA with Multnomah County Transportation for the basically the design, construction, and maintenance of up to 4 solar pedestrian crossings on Halsey as part of the ODOT Small City Allotment Grant received by the city. So the city did receive a $100,000 grant from ODOT. Part of that grant, before any funds are released to the city, ODOT is requiring that we enter into an IGA with Multnomah County, basically describing the transaction, which is the city is funding and constructing the project once completed and accepted by Multnomah County, because it is Multnomah County right of way, that they would basically inherit the assets and maintain them. And the alternative is to, not approve the resolution and negate the $100,000 small city allotment grant, or approve resolution as presented. City goals: 1, definitely a safe, clean, inclusive community with a sense of pride and strong identity. And goal 6, effective local, state, and regional partnerships. That really goal number 6, that satisfying that partnership with ODOT for their requirements, and the city being awarded the $100,000 grant, and then the the agreement with Multnomah County for the inheriting the asset and maintaining it in the future.
Councilor Nissen, Council President Nissen, any questions at all for John?
I have no questions.
Councilor Minor?
No questions?
Councilor Rios Campos?
Just one, and you said potentially 4, and in In the picture, you guys identified 3 locations. Is that 4th one been identified or is it just like?
No, it has not. We had 4 locations identified. We're still looking at a 4th location to be determined in the future.
Yeah, the 4th location had right-of-way constraints. There wasn't enough right-of-way to put the facilities in. And so the north half would technically be in Fairview. And we didn't want to hold up the other 3 working through who knows what kind of jungle gym that would be. And so the agreements for 4, but at the point we're going to bid out for 3.
So when that 4th one does get identified and whatever gets worked out, it's just like, well, here we go. There's really.
Correct, absolutely. What I didn't want to do is say 3 and then all of a sudden we are, looking at 4. We have agreements in place with Fairview if there's right away there, and then be hampered with the resolution stating 3.
And we actually proffered to the county others on like Wood Village Boulevard, and they said, well, since we've got this template in place, now we could just update it with those locations when they come about instead of having a very large one that may span the next several years of construction.
So it is staff's recommendation to approve the resolution.
We pass on every opportunity to do urbanization.
I would make a motion to move and to approve resolution 19-2022.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Any
I
more
just want to make
questions?
sure, Councilman, thank you. Questions before we start with the motion?
I apologize.
No questions, no comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Councilman.
But that's all right. I move to approve resolution 19-2022, authorizing the city manager to execute the IGA with Multnomah County Transportation for the Northeast Halsey Street RRFB pedestrian enhancement project in compliance with ODOT's small city allotment grant agreement.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you,
John,
Mayor
I just
Johnson.
gotta say this, the nice work on both of you to getting this done. And while the small city grants has made some restrictions on funding for work on county roads, we are in the process of, I'm going to appeal that. And quote, appeal in a John Minor appeal. I don't know what the process is going to be yet, but I'm certainly going to have some more time with the small city grant committee about that. And this governmental agreement will be real important when we go to our next meeting, because that is the reason why ODOT does not want to fund projects on county roads through the small grant allotment, because they've been having problems with the counties getting agreements back to them. At least that's how I understand it from.
7 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this is an important document.
But that
So
just shows
nice
a
work.
great partnership we have with Multnomah County to make this happen.
Yeah. So that's good work.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
Although I'm glad I didn't have any liquid in my mouth when he said that. All right, so next up is Greg is back.
I'm
And this is
back.
the discussion on the community event grant process.
It seems like Greg gets all the great ones.
What do you mean by great? I mean,
Well, and this
controversial, surprising.
give away money. One to celebrate.
Where'd it go? It's gone now.
By now he should have learned. I mean, how long was our discussion on signage before we moved in?
I was thinking more of the tree.
Yeah.
All right, we'll just close some of these out. Give me a second.
We do pick some pretty esoteric things to go on and on about. That's for sure.
Easter egg.
Here we go. Oh,
Click the upper left, yeah.
okay, there we go. So our community events grant process. So much like we already talked about with trying to establish more events, there actually have been kind of community-centered grassroots events that have either been established, grown, or both over the last, in some cases, over a decade, such as the Las Posadas started off, I'll call it relatively small, but certainly over the past several years has grown to include more partners. And then certainly last year was a full blown, huge, one night event. There's also been interest in some startup events, such as for Cinco de Mayo, or Mexican Independence Day and things like that, and trying to gain some more traction. And while they're not necessarily city ran events, city supported events. And so in this current budget season, the council said, let's add a bit of money to support these kind of grassroots community led events that support the city's, vision, cultures, values, and goals, but they're not necessarily ours. So we have the money. We need a process now, and we've never done this. And so there's a couple of schools of thoughts in your staff report kind of outline the spectrum, and that's what's in front of you right now. You have the kind of take each event as they come along and evaluate it, much like you did the past few with the Cinco de Mayo request. You had the organizers come in and say, hey, we have this idea for an event. Here's how much you would need for support, and this is what the event would look like. And you chose to grant it or not. Converse of that is you could have something very regimented and structured as, we're looking for these types of events that satisfy these types of activities, goals, or outcomes. It's, here's the application period, and it's a set time that anyone who wants to do one through the year has to apply during that time frame. Council reviews everything and awards as such. Both options have their pluses and minuses. On the one, as you review them case by case, you can kind of craft it to tailor that specific event or need. The downside is, someone comes in later in the year, there may not be more resource left. The converse side, you're getting all the events in one shot. People may not know about it, come up with a new idea, and you have to apply next year. So it's really, I provided the spectrum and wanted to open up to kind of what your thoughts were. Since this is, a brand new kind of thing in process to formalize it, we've kind of, as events come up, supported in those, general senses, but in terms of, hey, we now have a program. How do you want that program to work, function, and be promoted? So I think, even if it's, they come to the council, like more of the top choice there. And by top, I mean the upper view, not that's a recommended one. Certainly still have, some sort of framework around that, how to use the city logo, some general has to be open to the public, meet these kind of criteria, those kinds of things. So not just full loose, here's some money, go forth and have your whatever event. So I'm going to leave it on this slide to just kind of show the spectrum and everything in between, and then allow for some discussion and direction.
50-50 chance, or maybe 70-30 that I'm dense and that this question was answered and I just didn't figure it out. But the last thing I want to do is, honestly, is fund somebody's whole event, because then it's kind of just another city event. In terms of the cost, except for we didn't have the opportunity to offset any of those costs by going out and looking for donations or anything like that. And so I'm wondering if it wouldn't be easiest just to say that this is the size of grant we will give. We will give you $250 until $5,000 is gone, or we will give you $500 until $5,000 is gone. And then if the money doesn't get gone, when we come to the next budget time, we roll it over. We fund it with 5. Maybe there's, 750 or 1,000 left over. It becomes $6,000 that's available that year, and just kind of keeps going from there.
I kind of like that idea because it keeps it simple. And it keeps staff being able to respond to requests. And I think I like the concept of that as opposed to, trying to get a matrix that we're going to use or something. And I think staff, I believe staff is going to be able to sort out what kind of events that we would support in the city. If we need to have a formal discussion on that, that could be for a retreat. But I like the idea of the split. Then what'd you say?
Yeah, well, we could decide our number, 250 or 500. And then also, we have council discretionary funds. So for instance, Las Posadas, which is already hugely successful, but continuing to evolve. If they needed more, for instance, or anybody asked for more than the maximum that we can give, we could consider our council discretionary funds to help with the event as well. If they wanted to come before us and ask and make a presentation like people have in the past.
I do like the kind of the cap per se. I would just say up to, I wouldn't say, I would probably word to say up to 1,000 and kind of have these applicants, as they come present. I would like to see, if they could identify like city goals that this event might happen, because again, it's tailored to what, as a city, we have said, these are our priorities. So, a group says, they only hit 2. It's like, okay, they're asking for 1,000. Maybe, we can look at, okay, we can give you this much, but say an event, say they cover 6, 7 of them and they're asking for 1,000, that could kind of lead us and say, okay, that's really meeting a lot of our goals that we're not having to have staff do, and can really uplift what we're trying to do as a city. Kind of gives us that flexibility, just knowing how some grants do work, that you might ask for some and they say, well, we can only offer you this much. And so
I like the idea of the application and having them list out the goals or check boxes of the goals that it's going
Add,
to.
a spot for their budget.
Yeah.
Because that was certainly, how much are we funding of this? Is this,
Right.
A taste? Is it the whole thing?
yeah.
I would also like to see maybe the year broken up into 3 or 4 segments. I can't have I can't have an Easter egg hunt in December just so I can get my $1,000 grant for my event. I mean, there's some of those things are going to come along on a timeline. And I don't want to shortchange somebody that culturally or whatever that date is, they have an event in May. And they were looking at it thinking, okay, I can get my $500 or $1,000 to help out. That's really going to help push this along. And then everything's gone and we kind of shrug our shoulders. I would kind of, if we break it up and it's $2,000 well, not $2,000 a quarter, but
$1,250 a quarter. No, that's still, yeah.
yeah. And or we march it out in some way that we can spread it out over the course of the entire year. And maybe after the first year, we find that there are nobody puts on events from November to January because we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas and other holiday events that are going on.
Or you got Las Posadas though, so you already got one.
Well, and then again, I think as people that are requesting the funds, it doesn't guarantee them funds. So I think there's some type of, as we're helping direct staff to create something, I think that's why I said, does it meet city goals? I think that's huge. And so just someone saying, well, I'm putting this event on and, whatever. Well, how is it, benefiting the community or X, Y, and Z? That's how a grant works. You have to meet certain criterias to be eligible.
And I think even listening as, how does it meet the city goals? And they got to research what they are.
Yeah, sure. I think we need how to claw the money back if the event doesn't occur.
Well, and that could be the other thing is, it could be based, and no reimbursables can be hard, especially for grassroots, smaller events. We're also pretty good at turning, checks around, 2 weeks, give or take.
Was it Rudy that you were working on the potential Cinco de Mayo and car show with this past year?
Rudy? Yeah.
Yeah, and we did offer $500 of council discretionary funds reimbursable if the event occurred. And, can you say that about a grant, that it's a reimbursable?
Yeah.
And not to make it like too cumbersome, but I think there's some level of like, we want to ensure right? You, like Greg said, we just don't want to be handing out money that
Well,
we
maybe
might not have.
showing us your budget, you also show us your other funders.
Yeah, or,
You know,
what your event plan
Yeah,
is.
and, you know, some money in the bank. Like even enough to make it occur if you didn't get a grant.
Well, matching it up with our goals is a natural. And we don't need to invent anything else. If it matches our goals, we ought to be helping folks support that. It's some discretion on the, I don't, maybe a grand's the right number. I don't know, but some discretion, because if something is really, it's the right time and it's really matching goals, they may need a little bit more money. But I'm good with a number that we need a number tonight.
And a number would be helpful, and just, could even, I'll hedge and say generally grants are not to exceed 750, but you put generally, and then you get, something like, again, Las Posadas, that's an ongoing event. We know the partners, and that's grown, and it's not what it used to be. It's something, it's almost like a community resource fair, and what they're bringing to the table. Maybe that one is 800 or something.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's going to be our first year, right? And so how do we get the word out there? Being able to be flexible and not set in stone, and understanding to maybe we're asking too much. So, cut some things back out, or maybe we have just so many. So we have to kind of
Pick and choose and what's going to
yeah.
be most valuable.
Yeah.
Councilor Men, you have anything to add or ask about on this one?
The only thing I would say is I do agree there needs to be obviously some review, but the fewer barriers to community events, especially that align with our city values, the better. So I think maybe a happy medium between a really strict process with, very strict application process, and also a way to retain some flexibility there would be great.
So up to 1,000
Up to 1,000.
on the application, you have to identify the goals, and you have to agree to that you can give the money back if the event doesn't occur.
And then budget with other sponsors, and then a basic event plan. How does that sound?
Sounds good to start.
I'm either or on other sponsors. What if we are the only? But I
Yeah.
agree, kind of a breakdown on what the events.
General budget then.
General budget.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I've got my marching orders.
So there is a motion in the staff report, but is a thumbs up good enough for you to?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will take a thumbs up motion.
There.
I didn't see Councilor Men's thumb. Got to make sure Becky gets that in the minutes.
That's right. Okay. And our final agenda item then is also with Greg, and this is a discussion of the 2023 LOC legislative priorities. And I think that we do want to work to what our list of 7 is to submit to the league. That's what we've always done in the past. I apologize for not, getting my votes out to you sooner. So that, if we found that we coalesced on some that we wouldn't have to necessarily chat about them, we could just approve them. Something to think about for next time around. In the past, we've done dot exercises and things like that. And so, but I think we'll just kind of have Greg go through them, and maybe somebody can kind of tally whether or not there is any counselor that has support for that one, and then the 7 with the largest number of hash marks are our 7.
It's actually it's 5.
Five,
Yeah.
okay.
From 4 from the previous time. So that was nice. And just a little bit of background for some of you that may be new to this. So the League of Oregon Cities is the main advocating branch for cities. Generally in Oregon, some larger cities actually have their own lobbyists and things, and they pursue their individual goals and objectives, potentially along with supporting the league's priorities or even some of these things on here that didn't make the priority list. So what the league does is all the cities that are part of the league get the same ballot. All the cities then have the opportunity to vote, not saying all do. The league then tallies those, and essentially how it's supposed to work are the top 5 essentially become the league's priorities. It does seem like at times the league also then kind of evaluates the proposals of what has potential successes in the legislature. They don't want to spend a lot of time going after what essentially may not go forward. So even though let's say the league comes out with their 5 or so priorities, some may drop pretty quick if they can't get any traction or support. Others will be added certainly as the legislature session continues to grow, be refined, and we start seeing what that's looking like. But these are what the league will try to pursue early on and get that support and then see how it goes through the session. So I just want to double check. Councilor Min, can you see that list well enough, or you want me to try to bump it up a little bit?
I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is the general, listing of them. The full description was also in your packet. If you have any questions on it, Seth served on a couple of committees. The mayor served on some committees.
My name was in the roster. I didn't actually make it to any meetings, but I did get minutes and the recaps.
And actually just want to pause also and, thank Seth for his work, and actually Jeff too, who was instrumental in helping us craft some strategies around a lot of the property tax reform ones where the league was giving significant pushback. We utilized Jeff's expertise in constitutional law for City Hall After Dark to push the league to actually say, no, there are some lower barrier things we can do that make a huge difference. So with that, we'll just go right down the list, and any volunteers for tallying? I've got a packet.
I'll keep a tally.
I was looking right the whole time.
I saw that.
He is a numbers guy.
Yeah. I can count to 5.
I'll be the ballot observer. That's all going to.
All right, so we'll just start here with 4A. That's full funding and alignment for state land use initiatives. This is like akin to what we had House Bill 2001. State did some funding to help cities implement that. We also now have potentially have the climate friendly equitable communities thing that at this point is not funded at all. There's also talk of a lot of other things. Basically, this one is saying, look, state, if you put additional land use and planning mandates on us, you've got to pay for those. So that in a nutshell is 4A.
Are we going through each one?
I thought I'd just kind of go down the list like a quick summary like I just did. And if people
I
already
marked them as under the categories. I didn't mark each one of those subsets.
So yeah, each subset is its own priority.
Oh,
Like 4A through E, then you have 5A through D. Those are 9 different priorities.
okay.
Local funding to address homelessness. This one was a little vague in its description because it talked both about certainly the need for local funding, but also talked about more state oversight in terms of how that funding and support would work with not a lot of detail or specifics. And I think as we've seen just from our current situation at joint office, sometimes when you have a larger entity overseeing things, it may not work so well on the boots on the ground level. But that was the general gist of it, is supporting more funding for local, but seems to be overseen by the state. 4C infrastructure, that was targeted at needed housing. Not sure. There's a lot of stuff talking about infrastructure in this one, and it seems both for deferred projects as well as kind of expanding as cities start to grow, SCC's not keeping up, or costs increasing. How do you provide the infrastructure for that growth and development? Economic development incentives. This one is really targeted around for us specifically, it'd be the enterprise zone, which is set to sunset, I think in 2025 or 2026. And so this would either remove the sunset or continue to push it. And we have been the beneficiary of several enterprise zone projects in our city, same with our neighbors.
Let me ask again to make sure we're picking 5 out of
Correct.
this list of that each one. 5 out of the entire list here.
Correct.
All the
Yeah,
subsets.
yes, all the
included.
subsets.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5.
3.
Well, I already got, I'm gonna go with the, up here on the.
23.
Yeah.
Number 4. I'm, gonna mark, I think the infrastructure.
Yeah, I was a supporter of 4B initially, but I'm going to strike that one from my list because I've got another one farther down that I did some more research on that I want to.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
got,
it seemed a little too vague for some of us.
And so I guess on 4D, and you're saying ours is about to sunset.
For this entire state, it would sunset.
Oh, it would-
And it's not just enterprise zone. There's 2 other programs. Some of them are more rural based, and I can't remember the other acronym for the other one.
CSIP, Strategic Investment Program.
Yeah,
It's the one that Gresham has on the.
Yeah, On Semiconductor came through that.
Yeah, campus.
Yep.
yeah. So it's actually 3 separate programs that would sunset in a couple of years statewide.
And I'll also point out 4D is also the same as 7C.
Yeah,
There's a couple of them that had multiple committees that
they're
recommended.
either the same or very, very similar.
good. Well, that's good to call that out, so we don't vote for 2 that are gonna, same thing. Similar thing.
Okay. So for our math guy, are we saying then that we have a vote for 4C and a vote for 4D?
That's what I heard.
Okay,
And who had the vote for 4C?
Council Minor. 4D is Council Rios Campos.
And so 4D was out of Rios Campos. Got it.
And then last on number 4 is community resiliency and wildfire planning tend to deal with kind of emergency management updating plans, but then also specifically looking at wildfire resiliency. To say probably wouldn't that part affect us per se or be the beneficiaries of it. Not to say you can't have urban or suburban wildfires. It seems to be more targeted at a little more rural communities.
Well, in the places that where, I mean, that's occurring because the wildfires that we experienced last year
Mhm.
and those places are adopting policies and the state's adopting policies on their behalf. And the governor has already talked about, kind of her, last hurrah being, spending a lot of money on developing wildfire resiliency. So I'm not sure that it even needs to be a league area of concern.
For 5, number A, that's protecting public employees and officials. So under the Oregon Public Records Law, pretty much people can request, personal contact information, addresses of just about any public official or staff member. This would carve that out as an exemption.
Yep. 5A.
I would second that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Brett Kavanaugh can just decide to eat steak in another state.
B, return to work. This one was, it's PERS reform. So essentially, I believe it was was it 17? It was fairly recent. PERS did a bit of reform where retirees can come back and there used to be a set cap on hours or there were some dramatic penalties. We utilize this with the past city manager. We're utilizing it now with our utility billing clerk. It has a sunset. So in another, I think it's 2023, that provisions expire. So they'd be same to the set restrictions of hours and then additional payments. This basically keeps the current program as it is.
That's been beneficial.
Yes, we've used it.
I would vote for that one.
And I support this 100%, but I'm not gonna burn one of my 5 because that's gonna be, that's not going away. And I don't think there's gonna be legislation that's gonna pull that back. You're gonna be able to work back. So,
Well, there has to be affirmative legislation or it's
yeah,
sunsets.
but
Now,
I'm saying.
I agree. I think it's going to be a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. That's what I'm saying.
attorney-client privilege. So we do have that for when we communicate with Jeff or his colleagues in certain areas. The bulk of it expires after 25 years. And so then people can do records requests for litigation or privilege items 25 years later and essentially find out all the details. That's something that doesn't really exist on the private sector, where private stuff is private stuff. It's kind of an oddity in the public records law again. So this would attempt to close that provision. That attorney-client privilege is attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, this one's the result of a very surprising recent Supreme Court decision where the city of Portland took it up and the court concluded that there's this sort of blanket provision that if a record is 25 years old or older, you have to disclose it. And it hadn't ever been applied to privileges that are not in the public contracting code, of which there are about 150. They found out that it was. So this would sort of restore the law to what everybody thought it was before the Supreme Court case.
And then the last one for number 5 is address measure 110 shortcomings. This seems to be both kind of, I'll call it monetary as well as a bit structurally in terms of how this program working. So this is the ballot measure that attempted to, instead of
Decriminalize possession of.
to then
small
encourage
amounts of
a
hard drugs.
recovery services for drug related crimes and addiction. And it seems, so it did 2 things. One, it was funded with cities, primarily cities, marijuana tax revenues from the state side of it. So we saw our revenues decline quite a bit. And there also doesn't seem to be the optimal mechanism to get people into treatment services. And so you're getting the state having hundreds of millions of dollars, cities took a hit, and people still aren't getting services.
And it's because the state's not releasing any of the money. This is the one that I traded my 4B for. I'm a supporter of 5D. I was looking at the CDC, and in 2018, there were 40 states that had a higher percentage of deaths by drug overdose than the state of Oregon. And then I read an article on OPB from April of 2022, where we had fallen to second to last, even though we have this program where people can avoid going to prison by going to treatment. And part of the reason is that the treatment providers haven't got the money from the state yet, $276 million that hasn't been allocated to treatment providers. And to the extent that the league might push them in the direction of allocating that money so that people can get the care that they need, then I think this is a good one. Because, you know, if you look at other places like Portugal, maybe, I don't know, a decade or 2 decades ago, decriminalized, and their addiction's down dramatically because they actually really did treat people. We haven't treated anybody yet. So if you don't get treatment, you stay on the drugs. And if you stay on the drugs, you die. So, and so this is why I dropped, like say 4B, and this is one that I support.
So Mayor, sorry, 5D will force the state to give those funds to treatment providers?
In the staff report, that's what the league indicated would be one of their goals, would be to, you know, help to push or create the mechanism by which these funds are dispersed.
Okay.
As well as potentially restore funding to cities. Potentially.
Be down to 5D.
All right.
Yeah, it was a very broad one, so it'd probably multiple potential legislative actions, and it'd be hard to say which ones would gain traction or what, but certainly trying to address, like I said, the shortcomings or lessons learned is probably a better phrase for that one. I'm going to be honest, a lot of ones in number 6 seem very similar to me, but certainly the first one is a little bit unique and distinct, and that's looking at certainly not just new construction, but retrofitting existing buildings to be, you know, not LEED necessarily, but more green, more efficient, and mechanisms to make that possible. Number 5B or 6B looks continued investments in renewable energy. I mean, again, a lot of these couple with one another. 6C seem to be related to, again, kind of that climate friendly equitable communities and related to the one earlier about state funding for required initiatives. And that's certainly what climate friendly and equitable communities is trying to do, is build, a little more resiliency. But how do you do that without necessarily the funding? And that certainly is the case with 6D. It says it right there. So a lot of them are very, very similar, I would say, with the exception of 6.
I went with 6D to try to capture the rest of them.
Yeah. 6C was on my list. And actually, because in some ways, because if the cities are successful in their lawsuit to slow DLCD down, it doesn't necessarily mean we want to stop the work.
Yeah,
We want to be able to sort of take on the work in bite-sized chunks, or take on the work that's necessary for our city.
Or
but not
frame it in a way that's meaningful
mandate.
for each community and not a blanket, here's what you shall do.
Yeah.
No, because a lot of what work was trying to do, it's on an upper level, it's good things. They got so detailed though that it would be very tricky to
Well,
implement.
and the way they foist it on us could very well be, that light oncoming train.
So I'm 6D.
Yeah, I got 6D. Mayor had 6C. Those were the only ones I heard.
All right, finance and taxation policies. So Seth was, in deep on this one.
Yeah.
Property tax reform, this had several, I think about almost a page in itself of different kind of components that were kind of short-term, long-term, what was constitutional, what may be more statutory, and it evaluated everything from what we helped partner back a few years ago with Multnomah County in adjusting the change property ratio and doing that kind of on a statewide level, or even a more kind of holistic reevaluation level, all the way up to, full-on property tax reform measure. So 7A encompasses a lot of stuff. And I think part of what, if that's one of the league's ones, would be shaped on what's going to be successful in this session.
I'm a 7A.
I'm a 7A.
And I will just say that some of the members who were on the committee noted that this has been a league priority for the last 6 legislative sessions, and that we will like to advocate for things wasn't. If it was brought back as a priority, there was an expectation that the league would take the lead on at least one initiative to actually
I'm
change.
an A on it too, because it
Yeah.
captures.
We hosted City Hall Day here in Wood Village. A year where like 3 of their priorities, but all of them were around needing a constitutional amendment. And like Greg pointed out earlier, Jeff did a lot of work to point out that.
Oh,
hey,
Seth
there's some-
did 10 times more work than me.
Yeah.
I just reviewed it.
so here's some low hanging fruit that maybe you haven't considered that could make real impact.
I mean, just to say that it was a small adjustment for change property ratio in terms of what it did on paper, it goes on for forever. And Seth did great work of showing, look, here's what it is at 1 year, 5 year, 10 year and out. And that revenue that gets captured from essentially an accurate portrayal of what the value in the spirit of that should be.
I'm also a 7B.
I do.
Because I mean, it's like how many hotels can you think of, like all along Interstate Avenue, for instance, where tourists aren't going there, but the homeless are and the drug dealers are. And so, if you could target the money that's collected in your neighborhood to do solid work in your neighborhood, why wouldn't you want to?
Yeah, and there's a couple of communities on the coast that are very heavily dependent on lodging tax revenue that were pushing this fairly aggressively, exactly for that reason.
I don't gotta explain that one. But really, I mean, in the short thing, their lodging taxes after 2003 are restricted to essentially tourism related activities. And the effort for this is to lessen that to encompass more holistic city services.
I mean, and that would help a lot of small towns like us that, only have, whatever it is, 11 sources of income. We're talking about upping rights of way fees, but, would we have to up them as high if we had more flexibility on lodging?
And because our fees are actually pre-existed, that we have more discretion in how we can use them, but I'm not going to call us unique. There are cities who have that ability, but a lot of them don't, because it's either if you had it, but if you increased it, then you've got to share it. I mean, not share, but target it. Economic development incentives, that's just mirroring the one from earlier. Marijuana taxes, it's kind of related to 5D because that was a piece of 5D, but it also then talks about increasing if cities want to, there's a cap on what the city tax could be, and that looks at increasing that as well as bringing back more state shared revenues.
I'm a 7D.
And Councilor Mann, anytime you want to throw a vote in, go for it. Or if you want to,
Or your dog.
or if you want to.
He's got a lot to say right now. I'm confused. We're only voting for one?
No, you
get 5 votes.
You could have cast a vote necessarily for all of them. We're going to adopt 5 that have the most votes for the council.
I see. I would say 5D.
I'll scroll back up.
Yeah, thank you. 5D and 8B or C for now, and then property tax reform.
And then the last one for 7, that was 7E for alcohol revenues. That's both looking at what the tax rate is for Oregon. It's one of the lowest in the country, but also there's I'm not sure if it went through or is going to go through, but essentially the state taking more portions of that to build a new 150 some odd million warehouse. And so that comes out of the city's pot for that. And there are alcohol related expenses cities have. I mean, much like transient tax revenues that go to various things, a lot of our OLCC tax revenue helps fund law enforcement, for example.
Wake me up when Oregon elects the legislature that won't cave to the brewers and the winemakers.
And the only reason why this was kept on the priority list was the budget for that warehouse has grown from an initial estimate of 50 million to the current 150 million.
It's a fancy warehouse. Number 8 is all on the telecom broadband. So we have, again, a lot of them, I think, overlap and similar. So I'm going to kind of point out where some differences are. Certainly 8A is really looking at not just where broadband is, but how do people have access to it? So again, much like our community, we've got 2 providers, but we know people don't have access because of affordability or devices. And so what this tribe does is on a statewide level, not just look at what's in the dirt, but what's really that access people have, looking at it from that view as well, and then providing funding to remove those barriers.
And I'm going to keep voting for it until we accidentally trip over doing it.
I'm an A.
2 A's.
It's not like it was the most inclusive of the group.
I'm also an 8C, just because as Greg pointed out, the infrastructure exists, at least in the populated areas of the state. But whether or not people can access it is usually the issue.
Yeah, 8A and C for me as well, please.
And 8C, also talked about those consumer protections, because while we have things like the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, that's cable services. And as people are moving more and more towards, call it just internet services, how those franchises are managed and handled and dealt with is not optimal. And, this would help start crafting real protections and agencies for consumers. I really had honestly no idea what 8D was. I know what it said, I know what its intent was, but I don't know what it was going to do. It certainly talked a lot about the importance of cybersecurity and privacy, but I don't know what they would do with it.
Yeah. If you can't access it, how much protection do you need?
All right, 9A, I believe this one mostly dealt with the ability for cities to have more local control on speed, specifically on state-owned highways within the jurisdiction, and the ability to essentially move them 5 miles an hour without going through the standard process.
Only on state-owned?
Yeah, only on state-owned
So
highways.
so we could change the I-84 speed limit by 5, but we couldn't have that. same
Oh, the other
discretion on
caveat was
a
had to
single
actually
straight
go through
line.
like a developed part of the community. So no, not like a freeway, but like 82nd
Okay,
Avenue
all right.
or US 26,
US
for
26.
example, or US 30 in
Oh.
some communities.
And so, I mean, we've had people come to us before and want their speed limit lowered, and then we've done the speed studies and found that people were going slower than the posted rate on average anyway. And it'd just cost us money for the signs, and it wouldn't change behavior. And so, if they're not even going to give us that option, like they gave Portland,
Yeah.
then why would we vote for this one in my mind?
9B, it seems to be part of that, we've got the vehicle miles per hour was already a pilot project. This would essentially institutionalize it, as well as potentially some vehicle weight things, and start to transition away from solely of a fuel tax into a road mileage tax or fee.
I'm a 9B.
You do know what you drive every day, right?
Yeah, I got a light footprint.
One thing, this did come up at the finance and taxation, and I did put a plug in that it would also be open to cities who, rather than adopting a gas tax, decided to do a street utility fee or some other mechanism to get at road maintenance costs, so that it wouldn't just be for people who already had a gas tax that you grandfathered in. There would be other ways for
It's
us, essentially.
just for I read this, but that particular, when I was looking at the transportation safety enhancements was going to be, but as I read it again here and just heard you, that's pretty specific. It's not what I thought it was.
Well, and I
If it's
think
just radar control.
C was the mobility one that I think maybe you're remembering, which looks at like the safe routes to school, the great streets, and trying to have funding for those components. My issue personally with that is, such with like safe routes to school, for example, is a great program. I want that clear and up front, and having kids safe access to schools. The problem is that it competes with the same pot of money as other needed, necessary, non-vehicle related travel that could actually serve more people, be more safe, and serve the community better. But because if you don't, this is not within a mile of school, you don't get funded.
Well, and every time somebody bends over and picks up a spare transportation nickel, that's the first place they want to send it, is safe routes to schools. I think it probably already has enough money.
The road, but the road user fee is what I'm asking about.
Oh.
Vehicle, is that congested pricing
No.
also?
It doesn't have congestion pricing.
No, it's just
Currently.
vehicle miles, VMT, essentially formalizing the pilot project.
Okay.
It's to get
Got it.
electric vehicles to pay their gas
Got
tax.
it. Okay.
But on the mobility services, again, that's money targeted at, you can call them complete streets. I think they called it the Great Streets Program, which Metro calls it something completely different. And that's kind of my hang up with these types of programs. Instead of a holistic view of a transportation system and how best to move the people, is, they target it in different buckets, but fund it out of the one, bucket. Versus Safe Routes to School actually used to be federally designated separate from all the other ones, but now it's all under the same funding umbrella. And then 9D is essentially a pot of money to deal with abandoned recreational vehicles, which, depending on their condition, could be tens of thousands of dollars per unit to properly dispose of. And, some cities are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
I'm a 9D, and actually, because, some pie in the sky desire to see the administrative rule say that, if you don't have the title, it's abandoned. And instead of, and we add to the cost of destroying it, buying it from the person that's living in it at the time, give them first and last for their RV so they can go move into an apartment and then destroy the RV.
10A, my recollection of this one is we have the Low Income Utility Assistance Fund. I think this acronym is close to that. It's something that you signed the IGA a couple meetings ago that the county is managing, and we're a partner to that. This would make it more, it's funded with ARPA funds. This would make it more of a permanent fund to keep the program going longer than what the ARPA funds would sustain. Place-based water resource planning. This is, I believe, is more targeted at some parts of the state which are experiencing and have experienced severe drought, and how to long-term manage that critical resource, both for, people living and quality of life, but also for needed commercial endeavors such as agriculture. And then 10C is another infrastructure one that I believe kind of partnered with, I think yeah.
I'm a C on that one.
So that is the cliff notes of the priorities. I think some people have a few more votes, or at least see where we've landed.
I'll go through each counselor and what I have down so far. So Mayor Harden, you had 5D, 6C, 7A and B, 8A and C, and 9C. Was there any one of them?
9D.
9D.
Yeah, 9D.
My bad. I'm sorry, I misread that. So 9D. Okay. Councillor Nissen, 5A and D, 6D, 7A and 7D, 8A, 9B.
There should have been a 6 in there.
Adequate funding for state climate initiatives.
Nope. Five A and D.
Yep.
7A and D,
Yes.
9B.
And you also had one for digital equity inclusion, 8A. All right, Councillor Minor, I had you down for 4C, 7A and B, 8A, and
Just
10C.
let me go down through it here. I got C, 4C, 6D, 7A, 8A, and 10C.
So you didn't want the lodging tax flexibility?
No, it's property tax reform.
Okay. Councillor Rios Campos, 4D, 5A, 5B, and 8A.
Can I do a 6C?
Okay, 6C. All right. And then Councillor Amend, I had you down for 5D, 7A, 8A, B, and C.
Yes, could you also add 6C and 4? Would you mind scrolling up, Greg? Thank you. 4C as well.
Or C.
Thank you.
Okay, so then now give me a second.
Votes are in.
100%.
Normally I would plug all this in the
100%
spreadsheet and it would pop out quickly, but I'm gonna
While
tally the votes by
Steph
hand.
is doing that, I got to make an editorial comment here. As I was looking at this, my highest priority is that the League of Oregon Cities, along with the National League of Cities, pressure and campaign for all their state representatives and congressional reps to build back better. Because right now, that bill is languishing in Congress. And I hope the League of Oregon Cities is doing some pressure on getting that, because when you go down and look at this list, it's build back better.
Yeah.
And we're sitting around here fooling around with these little things. And that's where I hope the League of Oregon Cities and the National League, and I don't know that organization, but I hope that they're pounding on state representatives, because that's where this is going to get happen. That's where it's going to happen.
I think the National League is, I mean, at least the limited amount of things that I have read, I would say that their political bent is towards passage of Bill.
I can try to reach out. I can't guarantee a response from either one, but I can just kind of see what their response is.
Well, I mean, again, it's an editorial comment, but as I read this today, it just frustrates me.
All right, so I've tallied the votes. We had 2 initiatives with 4 votes. That was 8A, digital equity and inclusion, and 7A, property tax reform. Those both got 4 votes. Receiving 3 votes was 6C, investment in community climate planning resources, and 5D, address measure 110 shortcomings. And so that's 4. And then we had 3 that each had 2 votes. 4C, I'm sorry. I'm looking at 5C. 4C, infrastructure funding to support needed housing. 5A, protecting public employees and officials, and 8C, incentives for broadband affordability, adoption and consumer protection. So we had a 3-way tie for the 5th.
Okay.
vote.
So. Want to just go down the line and see if one of them gets 2 or more votes, or however many it is to break the tie.
Yeah.
So will you read them off for Council President Nissen again?
Sure. And you want to know how many people voted for?
No, just what the 3 that got 2 votes are.
Okay, so 4C, attorney-client privilege. Having a hard time reading tonight. 4C, infrastructure funding to support needed housing. 5A, protect public employees and officials. And 8C, incentives for broadband affordability, adoption and consumer protection. I can go back and read through those, and you guys can each vote for one, and we can see which ones are
I'm going to vote for 5A.
Is there anyone else who would vote for 5A?
I did. I will if it'll break a tie.
I mean, because the question is, out of those 3, what do you all feel is the priority out of those 3?
Yeah.
I had 2 solid votes for 5A. 4C, infrastructure funding and supporting needed housing.
Infrastructure funding.
Then
Well, I already voted for that, so.
you did, but then if you had to vote for one of those 3,
Well, one of these 3, I'm getting lost.
I know.
So basically, we have the top 4. We have room for 1 more.
That's all right.
And so now it's out of those 3 and you
Out of
5
the 3 that
people.
got 2 votes, which one's the most important to us? I'm an 8C.
And then the last one's 8C. Is there anyone who would advocate for that?
I'm an 8C.
I'm also 8C.
So so right now I have Counselor Nissen and Jairo Rios Campo picking 5A, and the mayor and Counselor Amend picking 8C.
So
Counselor
you wanna-
Minor,
so you
between
wanna
those
pick
2.
our 5th with 5A or 8C.
Well, let's go with down to 5. 8C.
8C.
Okay. So now we got 5.
Okay.
Swing vote.
You like Joe Manchin?
There's a lot of weight.
You'd be holding up a no vote.
Very much for your time on that one. It might have been, I probably should have set the staff report a little better, including, hey, go ahead and note your choices. If you want to send them ahead of time, then we could have displayed them and maybe saved a bit of time. But certainly we'll make
Next
that
time.
adjustment for next time. And Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I've got just a couple announcements before we
Go for it.
adjourn. One is we got notice today from Cultivate Initiatives that due to their organizational structures and what they're going through with their growth and development, both as an organization as well as for their workforce programs, they will no longer be able to support what we're trying to do here with the day-to-day maintenance of the park, rights of ways and things. They said they'll continue to provide support while we figure out what our next steps are. But they said for right now, they can't do the work. It wasn't quite as they expected with the right match for where they're at organizationally. We still support them holistic, with what they're trying to do, and coming out here more and growing their program. So that was just an unfortunate thing that came.
But they are interested in one-off projects,
Mhm.
not so much the
Regular.
every day-to-day
Yeah, okay.
structured.
Yeah.
Their organization just isn't quite ready for that. So it's more kind of the one-off projects, maybe clearing some,
Utility
wastewater
easement,
easements
brush,
that we have. But as far as the day-to-day and scheduled type maintenance, it's not up their alley.
Is that because they just haven't scaled up for it and have the
It's a little
consistent
bit
help?
of
and-
both, scale up in terms of, I think, their own oversight so they can develop the workforce team, but also where their current workforce team is at, and building up not only their skills, but their confidence, abilities, and what that takes. So we even said like in a year or two,
Sure.
as it matures and we've got people that grew in the program, they said, absolutely, we'll reevaluate where we're at as an organization.
Good. Well, we'll keep supporting them.
We want
Yeah.
them to be successful, and that means, hey, this isn't the right projects right now. That's great. I'd rather them be successful long-term than to push in the short term. Parade reminder for Night Out. I sent out a notice last week about where you all wanted to stage for being in the parade, kind of offered some ideas. I think, the optimal one is somehow you get to the Baptist church, whether you walk or drive, and then we take you to the event site and then drive you back in the actual parade. So just while everyone's here, thought, how does that sound to you all? Councilor Rose Campbell's got his own fancy float, so he won't.
I'm gonna stick with you guys.
Using your mind.
No, you gotta keep you on your toes.
Greg, sorry, did you say we're meeting at the church?
That would be the preferred one, but we
Okay.
can work with you. It was just, meet at the church, because then we just, whether your car is there or what, we take you to the parade site and you don't have to worry about trying to get, if you meet at the parade site, your car is there or something.
I'll see
Same
you
with
at the
City
church.
Hall.
Yeah, I'll be at the church.
What time at the church?
No later than 4:40, no later than 4:40, because we got to be at the parade site 4:45 to then final stage and then, get to the church by 5, all the way across town at rush hour.
At rush hour, that's right. 223rd car.
And then certainly at the event, it's your own time. But we'll have bags of candy for you to hand out to kids and guests. We've got our city booth that will have, our newsletter, resource guide, other various, papers, as well as bubbles. So we'll have handing out bubbles and playing with bubbles. And then, we'll have the food, entertainment, all that good stuff.
I didn't know where there were going to be bubbles. Now I know what I'm going to do the whole night.
And I have ordered the vests for Councilor Amend and Councilor Rose Campos, so they should be in. You may just be getting them right before the parade. And then my last one is the League of Oregon Cities Conference. Registration opens tomorrow. Those tend to go quickly for reservations, stay at the conference hotel. I have looked at the agenda. I'm not planning on going this year. It is in Bend in October. I think it's the 13th, call it mid-October. Just again, want to let you see if anyone is interested so I can make those reservations and plans for you starting tomorrow.
And if you want to go, the city will cover the reasonable.
Yes, city
expenses.
will cover the cost of the registration, the hotel room, all that stuff. It seemed kind of like
They meet quarterly. Is this their annual?
This is their annual conference. Then they do a brief spring conference that I've never attended. Then they do kind of quarterly small city regional meetings.
The dates are October 5th through 7th.
That's off by a week. That's not so bad.
You want to do keg stands in your hotel room, we're not covering that.
Well, it just depends how it shows up on the reimbursement receipt.
If there is a meal provided as part of the event, you don't get per diem for that.
And how much is per diem?
You need to make sure that the brewery you're attending serves food.
There may be a time I go, but not this year.
The agenda did, I attended to go for the last several years. It was in person. The remote ones were a little different, kind of popped in and did not spark any interest for our organization in the community. It seemed kind of a recycled effort. That was not on the agenda.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
Just really fast, sorry. 4:30 at the church on Arata on Friday, right?
Please, yeah, no later than 4:40.
Okay, and can my son come?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, great.
But he has
Thank
to
you.
wear a funny hat.
As long as he's
Oh,
got.
I'm sure he'll be happy to oblige.
Our fleet
Oh, okay.
in the back of a pickup on a hay bale.
Yeah.
Well, I may bring my grandson. They're flying in.
They got to wear a funny hat too.
Seen me try to climb in the back of a dump truck a few years ago.
Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, so we'll probably, we'll probably do two
liability
pickups. That way there's room for counselors and guests.
All right. On that note,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Counselor Amend.
Thank you.